Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify nation, and if you're new here, welcome. In this episode, we're going to look at configuring standard IPv4 access control lists. We'll be discussing how to create an access control list, numbered and named standard IPv4 access control list syntax, how to apply that standard IPv4 access control list. Then we're going to take a look at a numbered and named standard IPv4 access control list example. This episode is part of my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation. I am Kevin, here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. When you go to create an access control list, there's a couple recommended steps that you should take. One of the first ones is to configure that access control list in a text editor outside of the actual Cisco operating system. This allows you to make changes, and if you get a command out of order, you can just cut and paste, put it in the right order without having to completely redo your access control list. This means something like WordPad, Notepad inside of Windows, or most people do recommend Notepad++. That's a download you can get off of the internet. It's a free text editor. It's a very good text editor. I do recommend it. Once again, that was Notepad, and then there's 2 plus signs afterwards. Once you got your text pad open, then you go ahead and you start putting in your iOS configuration commands. A lot of times you start with saying what you want to do. Well, we want to stop unauthorized access to the HR LAN. I would a lot of times write down my requirements in words, typing out like a sentence for each requirement. That gives me an idea of what I'm doing. Then I can go ahead and base my command off of that. Those sentences I typed in as a descriptor, those could very easily then be made into your remarks. You should always include remarks in your ACLs. Yeah, you're going to remember what each command did today, tomorrow, maybe a week later, maybe a month later, but six months later, when you got to come back and look at those access control lists, you're not going to remember. You've done a million projects since the last time you had to look at that, and all of a sudden you have to go back in and refamiliarize yourself with them. I highly recommend making those remarks in there and being as descriptive as you can. Once you have your Notepad all done, what you can do is you can copy that out of Notepad, and then you can go into your terminal emulation program, PuTTY, TerraTerm, and you can paste that in there. As long as you're in the right mode, you can go ahead and paste that in there, and it'll place that all into the Cisco iOS. It'll place your access control list in there. And of course, then the last step is to always thoroughly test your network. This should be done on a test network, but I understand most of you don't have the luxury of having a test network. You have your production network, maybe a couple devices. Do the best you can in the testing scenario. And then, I know this is not necessarily a popular suggestion, come in the weekends and implement your new ACLs. That way it'll allow you to change, see if there's any problems, do some troubleshooting. And once again, before you do that, make sure you have current backups of all your configurations. That way, if you do have an issue with the new ACL you put in, you can go ahead and load the old configurations in, and you should be where you were before you started, hopefully. Here's the syntax for this numbered standard IPv4 access control list. We enter this in global configuration mode. So over here on the left, we have router, and then in parentheses, we have config followed by the £. That signifies we're in global configuration mode. Then we start off with access list because we're building this access control list. Now, if we're creating a named standard IPv4 access control list, the process is a little bit different, but we're creating that numbered standard IPv4 access control list. So we start off once again with the access control list keyword. Then we put in the number of this access control list. Those ranges once again go from 1 to 99. or 1300 up to 1999. Any one of those numbers will mean you are dealing with a numbered standard IP version 4 access control list. Once we put that in there, then we have to make the choice. This choice happens in these squiggly brackets. We got a squiggly bracket here, we have a squiggly bracket here, meaning this is a required choice you have to make. And this access control entry that you're creating right here has to do one of three things. You either need to deny traffic based upon this access control entry, you can permit traffic to go through, or you can just put in a remark here, and then what is that remark going to say? That's what this text means right here. So you have to make a choice of these three. Once you do that, then you choose where the source address or the source network address to put in here. And that's where is that data starting. And that's the interesting traffic we're going to look at, is what you specify right here in the source. You don't have to specify that source wildcard, but I highly recommend it. That way you know what you're looking for. And once again, the wildcard is zeros followed by ones typically. It can be intermixed, but where the zeros are, that means we are going to compare those digits. If they match, if all the zeros match, then we're going to apply this access control entry. If not, we're going to go down to the next access control entry. And then finally, and we have a log at the end, and that's optional again. Once again, how we can tell it's optional, it has a square bracket. So log is optional, and also the source wildcard is optional right here. And this would then generate and send some information messages when an access control entry is matched. If you need to remove a numbered standard IP version 4 access control list, what we can do down here is use the no access list and then the number. And all you do is put in no access list and then what number it was, and this could be like access control list 10, and that will remove anything that has to do with that access control list 10. It'll remove all those access control entries that are associated with that. Here's the syntax for a named standard IP version 4 access control list. So once again, this is a name one. You don't put a number in, but you put a name. Here's the syntax. We start in our global configuration mode. Now, this is part of the IP suite, and this is a little bit different than that numbered standard ACL. And so we start here with IP and then space and then access list. We're creating this access list, and then we're saying it's a standard one. You have to say this is either standard or extended at this point in time. Right now we're just looking at the standard one, and then the name of that. Now the name of this, it's case sensitive. It can be alphanumeric, and it must be unique on your system. And I would make sure it's unique in my entire network. That way I know exactly what it is, where it's going, what device it belongs to. I would even go as far as putting the device name in the access list. That way I make sure it's unique for my entire network. Plus I know which device it's done, because a lot of times you design these access control lists in a text editor, you save that file, you copy, you paste it into your configuration, and this just makes sure that it's on the right device when you put that device name in your name for your access control list. Here's how we use it. Down here we're on R1. We start off with IP access list. We're doing a standard, and then we created the name here. When you create your name for your access control list, a lot of people capitalize the entire name. The reason they capitalize it is when you're scrolling through your configurations and you're looking for the names of your access control list, and if you've got 20, 30, 50, 100 different access control lists, capitalizing that name will make it stand out and more easier to find. You don't have to capitalize it. Once again, remember, it is case sensitive, but it just helps you as you go through and do that. Once you go ahead and enter in your command here, IP access list standard, and then you give it a name. Right here we're going to call it no access. Notice our prompt has changed. Our prompt is now changed to we're configuring a standard named access control list. We are now doing a named access control list. That's what our prompt looks like. So it took us out of global configuration mode, put us in the standard named access control list, and then from here we can go through and do our deny, our permit, and our remarks. There's a couple other options, but they're typically not used. This is where you go ahead and you put in deny, and then you put in your network address, and then you can go ahead and start creating your statements. You put the word deny in here, then the source address, and you complete it out, and you go ahead and enter in as many access control entries as you need for that named standard ACL. Once you create your standard IPv4 access control list, either a numbered one or a named one, then you have to apply it to an interface. You have to link it to that interface. So the process here is create your ACL, named or numbered, and then you link it to the interface. The command we use to link or bind a numbered or named standard IPv4 ACL to the interface is IP space access dash group. IP space access dash group. We do that from inside the interface we're going to do. So you have to go into that interface. So right here we have probably had our command from global configuration mode, and it was interface FA0/0/1. Then once we went into the interface where we wanted to apply that ACL, our prompt changes. Once again, we are now configuring an interface. Then we start off with our command. So IP space access dash group, and then it's either, and once again, we have the squiggly line here, meaning you have to make a choice. It's either option 1 or, and that line up and down means or here, option 2, and then end squiggly. And so you have to choose either one or the other. And so our choices here are either our access list number or it's the access list name. Whatever you created, a named or numbered one, you need to put that information in here. And then you have to make one last choice in the statement. Are you going to apply it to coming into this interface or going out of the interface? So you have to either put in or out there, so it'll show you which way you're going to apply that. Here's an example of a numbered standard access control list. If you like this episode on configuring standard IPv4 access control lists and you get value out of it, and depending upon what platform you're using, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment. Doing this supports the channel, which in turn helps me bring you more great content. You can visit my website at KevTechify.com for all of my details and how to get this episode in video and podcast form. Here's an example of creating a numbered standard access control list. We start off here, we're in global configuration mode. Once we're in global configuration mode, we start off with the keyword access list. We are building our access list, creating one access control entry at a time. So we start off with access dash list, and then what number are we working on? In this example, we are working on number 10 access control list. Then we have to make our choice. Are we going to permit, deny, or is this a remark access control list or access control entry? For this example right here, this is a remark. Go ahead and type remark, put a space in here, and then after that space, whatever appears here is going to be our remark until you hit enter to go down to the next line. Then on the next line, we go ahead and we start off with access list to create an access control list entry in our number 10 access list. And here we're going to permit host 192.168.10.10. So we're going to permit one host to make that connection to the internet. And then the last statement in our access control list is that implied or implicit deny statement, where it's not you don't actually have to enter it. And if what happens is it goes at the end of all your access control entries. If nothing matches that access control list going through each one of those entries, it's going to come down to that last statement, that implied deny, and it's going to get denied and not allowed through. You have to have one permit somewhere in your access control list to actually let traffic through. If you don't have a permit, everything is going to be denied. Nothing is going to get through there. So make sure you always have at least one permit statement in there. We entered in our two access control entries, one remark, one permit for access list 10. Go ahead and enter in the command do show access list. Now, the show access list should be entered into privilege exec mode. But here, because we are still in our global configuration mode, we can enter the word do in here, and it says, okay, go ahead, execute what command comes after it. Do this command. And this is just a little shortcut method to help you do things a little bit quicker. You could type exit and then show access list, and it'll do the same thing. But here we did the do show access list from global configuration mode. First thing it does is it lists out the name of your access list. And here it says standard IP access list 10. This number 10 right here is the 10 you entered here. That is the number you chose for that. And then each of these access control lists, it'll list out all of the access control entries that are not remarks. Notice we put a remark in there. It's not going to list that out right here. Then we list it out, and it starts off with a number 10 here. What this 10 is for sequencing order. It has nothing to do with this number that you chose here. It has nothing to do with this number here. Nope, not at all. So don't think that. This is a sequence number. And there is the command we entered, permit, and then the host IP address, the one we're allowing. That is what our access control list looks like now. Okay, we have that entered. Let's say all of a sudden we decided, hey, we have to add something else into this access control list. What we can do is now, down here in this second example, we can go stay in our global configuration mode, start off with access list, and then 10. So we're going to add an access control entry here to access list 10. We're going to create another remark. ACE permits all hosts in LAN 2. So this is now a different network than what we did previously. And we have to include our permit statement. So we look at the next line. We're going to permit anything from this network address with the wildcard of 000255. So we're going to permit anything on that 192.168.20 network. If we do the show access list command again, we get the header of the standard IP access list for 10. Once again, this value here comes from the entry you put in there to create that numbered access control list. And then these numbers here are sequence lists. Sequence numbers. 10 is that first one you entered in from the example up above. 20 is now this entry there. So that's the second non-remark statement in our access control list. We're going to permit traffic from the 192.168.20 network. Okay, we've set up our numbered access control list, our standard access control list. Now we have to apply to the interface. In this third example down here on the bottom, when we go through and apply to the interface, we go from global configuration mode. We say what interface we're going to into. Here we're going to go into serial 010. Once we're in there, you can see how our prompt has changed. Now it starts off with IP because we're dealing with the IP protocol here, and it's access group. This is access group. So what access group, what group of access control entries are we going to do? And that is signified by the number here. And we're going to do number 10. That 10, once again, comes from up here where you've entered that in when you created those individual access control entries. And then what direction? It'll be on traffic going out of our serial 010 interface. We can verify our numbered standard access control list in two methods. First method, we can do a show run. And right here, this show run statement, is going to filter, including the section based on access control list. So we're going to include the section and only show the section on access control list. Here is the information from our running config. When we look here, we can see that we have our first remark that we put in, and then we had the permit for the 10 dot network. Then we have our access control list 10. We have the second remark we did, and then what network we're permitting through there. That will give us all of those commands. This is where you go to check your remarks. If you do that show access list, it doesn't show the remarks there, but in the running config, it will list those out. Another way to verify your numbered standard access control list is to use the show IP interface, and then what interface you have that access control list bound to. We bound it to serial 010, and we're going to filter here based on any line that includes access list. We can see here that it's saying, gives us some information here about outgoing common access list, and then here outgoing access list is 10. That numbered access control list we created earlier, access control list 10, it's saying that is applied to our outbound traffic. We have nothing applied to our inbound traffic on this interface. Creating a name standard access control list, slightly different, but for the most part, pretty much the same. First thing we can do here is on our R1, we're going to remove that access control list number 10. To do that, we start off with the word no, and then access control list 10 in global configuration mode. That will remove anything that has to do with access control list 10, all those access control entries. Now we can go ahead and create our name standard ACL. We start off with IP space access dash list, and then are we creating a standard or extended? Right now we're just creating a standard, and then we give it a name. See how this name is all capital letters? That just allows you to identify easier the name of your access control list if you're looking through your configurations and you do have a lot of lines to look at. That will just make it stand out a little bit easier to identify. Then once we go into our named access list here, our prompt has changed, saying we are configuring a standard named access control list. First thing we put in there is we got our choice of deny, permit, or remark. So we're going to start off with a remark statement saying what we're going to do. We're going to allow, or we're going to permit a host with the IP address of 192.168.10.10. That's the same host we did from our previous example. And then we actually create that access control entry that allows that host. And we have the permit host 192.168.10.10. In the middle example here, we're basically starting from scratch because we're going to recreate our remarks here for our host IP address 192.168.10.10, and then permit that host to go through, then add in a remark that permits all hosts in local area network 2. We did that also in the previous example of a numbered standard ACL. And then we have the permit statement. And once we have all the configurations done here, we can go ahead and type exit, and we have configured our named standard ACL of permit-access, all capital letters. Once you have that configured, then we go ahead and we apply that to an interface. Same command for a numbered one as a named one. In the third example down here towards the bottom, we go into the interface. So from global configuration 1, we type in interface serial 010, takes us into the configuration mode of an interface, and then it's IP access group. What group of access control entries are we going to do? We're going to use the named access list of permit-access, and then you have to signify what direction, either in or out. And this command is the same except for right here. Previously we had a numbered one, now we have a name. Several ways to verify your name standard access control list. First, method right here from privilege exec mode, you can type in show space access dash list, and it'll list out any access control list you have here. Here it's going to say you have a standard IP access list, and then it's either the name or the number. Here we created a named one, permit dash access, and then it'll give you it'll give you a listing of all the non-remark access control entries in that list. Here we're permitting the host at 192.168.10.10, and we're permitting 192.168.20.0 network. And once again, at the end is that implicit deny. So you always got to make sure you include some permit statements in your access control list. Otherwise, everything else will be denied. Second way we can do that is do a show run. And in this example, we're filtering to include the section that says IP access list. And that'll give us our IP access list information. Here we have the IP access standard and gives us the name of our list we just created. And this is where it'll list out in your show running the remark statements. And so we have our remark and then the access control entry that does something that goes with it. We have another remark, and then we have our permit statement. Those are all the entries we entered in previously in that second example. And that's another way we can check that. Last way we can verify our name standard access control list is do a show IP interface serial 00. And on this particular command, I'm filtering to include any line that includes the word access list. Right here, we're seeing that the outgoing access list is, and then our named access list of permit access. Inbound doesn't have an access list set, but our outbound is permit dash access. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on configuring standard IPv4 access control lists. If you like this episode and got value out of it, and of course, depending upon what platform you're using, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All of my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com. You can get all these episodes in video and podcast form. In the upper right is my playlist for my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation. In the bottom right is one of my favorite videos that I have just for you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.